Greetings everyone and welcome to BrickCats. Today I am reviewing this T-47 Snowspeeder by BigJudge based off an older design by Larry Lars. Liking this review, subscribing to my channel, subscribing to my Instagram feed, or leaving a comment are all great ways to support what I do, and thank you very much to all of you that are returning viewers. In addition, I'd like to specifically thank YouTube user ArchieNove for recommending this model to me. The T-47 was an Alliance-modified airspeeder that saw service most notably at the Battle of Hoth and The Empire Strikes Back. In that battle, we get a lot of viewing angles of the Snowspeeder, and LEGO has released a number of official Snowspeeder sets, including 2 in the UCS scale. Instructions for BigJudge's T-47 are free and rebrickable, and there will be a link in the description. Without any substitutions, Bricklink gave me 4 stores and $49 before shipping and tax, or about $73 with shipping and tax, making this a very affordable model to begin with. In my reviews, I offer my opinions on aesthetics and model features, parts issues you might want to look out for, the build experience, the model's integrity, and last but not least, I offer my closing thoughts on the model. If you're watching this review, I assume that you've bought the instructions, well in this case I guess you don't have to buy them, or you're interested in building the model. I also assume a basic level of familiarity with Bricklink's ordering system, and LEGO nomenclature. My disclaimer on this and all my mock reviews is that I only use genuine LEGO bricks, and I always purchase the instructions. Lastly, I create these reviews for my own personal enjoyment, and in the hopes that my advice will make your experience more enjoyable and or less expensive. This is the standard gray and orange Snowspeeder, but there are instructions for a leader Snowspeeder with dark gray highlights. I would have liked to see a white option, as in general I think the gray makes the model a bit too dark, but I think you could probably do a straight substitution for the light bluish gray elements without too many parts issues. The only things that you would need to keep in the specified color, of course, would be the light bluish gray elements for the cannons and these flat silver minifigure candles, and the wheel struts that would make up the fin mechanism inside here. I think those only come in light bluish gray. Starting at the front, I like the shaping of the area just in front of the cockpit, although I do think it is a little bit too large and not quite steep enough to be strictly accurate here. It's definitely supposed to be more of a steep angle, and thus it would be inset more in between the 2 cannons here. The cockpit does hinge at the right location, but just due to the construction of it, it only opens up about that wide, or it only opens up that much, I should say. And thus, it's pretty difficult to get the gunner in their seat. So to do that, I typically just have to remove the cockpit, which is easy enough. It's only connected by these 4 studs on this windscreen, and you can fit in the gunner and the pilot. Both the gunner and the pilot are surrounded by instrument panels. You can see these printed tiles in here. And they both have controls for flying the ship and operating the harpoon cannon. And one of my favorite features of this model was how the 2 controls are different colors just to visually delineate the roles. So the gunner's controls are black, and the pilot's controls are dark gray. Dark bluish gray, rather. So as you saw, the minifigures fit in the cockpit no problem. Cockpit back. Oh, of course, I say this and I put the minifigure in wrong. The wings in general look pretty good. And there are some minimal gaps here and there, especially along the front section here, and a little bit on the side. But there's nothing too serious, and these are minimized, in my opinion, to the extent that the pieces allow. The angles for the wings look pretty good to me, and these are achieved using hinge bricks and plates. The cannons don't quite line up correctly. It's a little bit difficult to see. I'll try and find the right angle. Here's the best angle, I think. And this is because the modified plate that holds the front section of the cannon right here is a plate lower than it needs to be in order to line up with the rear section here. Now, like I said, it's pretty difficult to see this from most angles, and you really have to be looking for it, but it's definitely there, and if you're like me, once you see this, you can't unsee it. So you could fix this by raising this modified plate up one. That has the unfortunate side effect of making the cannons too far off the wings. So these cannons look pretty good, the front section here, very close to the wings, but like I said, if you lift up this modified plate, it kind of looks a little off in that regard. BigJudge also squeezed in some dark bluish gray on this section here of this rear, I don't know what it is, like a cannon section, to represent the greebling on that. Moving further back, I showed a little bit earlier, but the top flaps use the aircraft wheel struts and a droid arm to connect. It's a little difficult to see in there. And it works just fine. These don't actually sit flush with this section. And I think that if they did, and it doesn't sit flush because of the way the mechanism works, but I think if they did sit flush, it'd be a lot more difficult to open them up. So this works pretty well. Moving further to the back, the harpoon gun is represented with this 3L bar and the screwdriver piece, which looks fine, although like most other Snowspeeder models, it's much too large to be in scale. Around the back, we have the backside of the cannons with these 8-tooth Technic extenders, which do happen to be a lot more expensive than the 4-tooth extender you can see here. But this is actually, in my opinion, the perfect piece. It looks really good. This extra hole from this 1x2 Technic brick is a little unfortunate, and I feel like this could have been split into a 1x1 Technic brick and a solid 1x1 brick, just to make that surface whole, I guess, smooth. The engine exhaust fins are black on this model, which I think works just fine, and it's an array of tiles surrounded by round plates built in essentially two halves that meet in the middle here. There is a grappling hook and a string specified, but this leads to my biggest problem with this model, and that is once you unwind the string, it's actually really annoying to wind it back up again. So I have connected a string and it is attached, but to wind it back up, you have to take off this 2x4 assembly at the bottom here. And that allows you to squeeze your fingers in and roll the cable back. So you cannot get very much motion at one time on this, and if you have big fingers like I do, it's pretty annoying. So while this does have some play value, it's quite limited in my opinion, but I have a feeling that most people that build this aren't going to be using it to play with anyway, so perhaps that's not a big deal, but just be aware of that. While we're here on the bottom, the underside is mostly anti-studs, as one would expect, but BigJudge did make the effort to continue the color scheme on the bottom of the ship, which I think is definitely appropriate. This 1x2 clear brick is specified, and I think it's intended to prevent the model from tipping forward if you place it on a flat surface, but in my experience that brick is pretty much superfluous, as I don't find this tilting forward very much anyway. The display stand you saw earlier is quite simple, but I think it looks really good, and it holds the Snowspeeder at a nice angle, while the white slopes and the plates kind of remind us of Hoth. So overall, I am very impressed with this model in terms of its appearance. Overall, I'm very impressed with this model in terms of its appearance, and there are some noticeable trade-offs, but I think most of them are reasonable. And this Snowspeeder looks absolutely great on your shelf. BigJudge's T-47 requires 143 elements and 426 pieces, which does not include the stand. And the stand itself is a separate parts list, which contains 14 elements and 27 pieces. The 4-tile 1x2 with avionics, Star Wars copper red and silver pattern, part 3069 BPS2. These line the inside of the cockpit. You saw them earlier, but there's 4 of them, 2 on either side with the pilot and 2 on either side with the gunner. These tend to be a little expensive, so if you don't care about the printed tiles, you can use any printed tile that you have in your inventory, or even a printed slope I think would fit there. Otherwise, you could just leave them out or substitute them for dark bluish gray or something if this is just going to be a display model. The minifigure screwdriver wide head 3-rib handle in black, part 11402A, is used for the harpoon gun, and it's fairly expensive, averaging over $1 a piece. You can easily substitute the new bar 2L with stop ring, part 78258 in black, or alternatively you could use the lipstick piece in black, which is 93094 PB03. And a side note, I think that if you use these two in conjunction with each other, I think this would be a much more accurate scale harpoon gun. In fact, let me just do that now real quick. The Technic driving ring extension with 8 teeth inside and outside, part 35186 in light bluish gray, is used for the main cannons, and like I said, it's fairly expensive. The 4-tooth driving ring that you can see here is much less expensive, and it's already used on the opposite side clearly, and this is part 32187. So cost is a big issue for you. This is a pretty easy substitution to make without too much impact, but like I said, I do think this is a really nice part to use on the end of the cannon here. Past that, the only other semi-expensive piece were these trans-clear Technic lift arms, modified bent thick 1x11.5 double, used in the stand, and that is part 32009 right here. I like these clear ones to give it the Lego floating effect, but if cost is an issue, you could certainly swap these out for light bluish gray, or even make the entire stand black if you just want kind of a nice looking black display stand. And since the part list is not very large to begin with, I don't think you get significant savings ordering specific elements from Pick-a-Brick. If you do decide to do that, my advice is to order as much as you can directly from Lego, and this increases your odds of reducing your Bricklink store account and also meeting the $35 minimum threshold to get free shipping and handling from Lego. There were a couple of minor issues in the build that I noticed, but nothing too problematic. In step 4, there's an odd 1x1 void underneath these bracket pieces, which could lead to instability later on, so I just substituted some randomly colored 1x1 plates to fill that. In step 7, the 2x3 plates are floating until step 9, and since this is a couple of bricks in height at this point, it's not like you can pre-position them on a table or something, so this is just a minor sequencing error, but at least it's not hidden or unintuitive. Finally, in step 52, it's pretty unintuitive how you get this front assembly to come together with the 6x3 wedge plates. It looks simple enough, but the angles and the tolerances are pretty tight, and you can see that even in the instructions it looks like there is a studio collision with this 4x2 wedge and the 6x3 wedge plates on either side. So my advice is just to not look at the instructions too hard. You know that these need to make an angle, and that you know that this 4x2 wedge goes on the front here. So it kind of only goes together in one way, and if the angles don't look right, you'll notice it pretty quickly. So other than these, the build goes very smoothly, and it only took me about an hour. This is a reasonably solid model with only a few obvious weak points. The harpoon gun is right near where you want to put your thumb, so you do need to be careful to put your thumb on either side to get a grip on it. And the engine fins are also in the same area and are a little less robust, and these are pretty easy to avoid putting pressure on if you're just careful with your fingers underneath. There is a little bit of rattling, maybe you can hear it, and that is a side effect of the various parts of the cannon, especially in the front here, not being secured at both ends. And of course the grappling hook can also rattle a little bit. And speaking of the engine fins, these two pieces on the side on either side, so one here and one here, the connection is a little bit tenuous, so you do tend to knock those loose, but they're pretty easy to put back together. The middle section is reasonably solid, and I haven't experienced those popping off en masse yet. So, in conclusion, the Snowspeeder is reasonably durable. It's it's also very easy to get on and off the stand. It uses a Technic axle placed into this Technic hole down here. So when you take it off the stand, there's a nice motion, and it doesn't take the axle with it, which is nice. And the stand itself is a little bit wobbly, depending on how much you bump it, but it does the job. You could easily make this more stable by extending the plates out a couple studs in either direction, but this is not going to fall off under casual bumping. BigJudge's T-47 model is, in a word, a very good model. There are a couple of easily fixable issues, such as that extra hole on the back here, or the alignment of the cannons, but otherwise it's just about as detailed as they come. With instructions available for free and an economical parts list to begin with, there's a lot to like about this model, and I don't hesitate to recommend this to any level of builder. With no substitutions, Bricklink was returning 4 stores and $49 before shipping and tax, for about $73 with shipping and tax. Substituting out those 1x2 printed tiles for plain dark bluish gray tiles, the screwdriver for the 2L bar, and the 8-teeth driving ring extensions for the 4-tooth part, this brought the cost down to 3 stores and $43 before shipping and tax, or about $61 with shipping and tax. Eliminating the stand, as well as making the substitutions I mentioned before, got me down to 3 stores and $37 before shipping and tax, or about $55 with shipping and tax. But I do recommend keeping the stand, as it looks pretty good, and the model looks very good on it. Thanks again for joining me for my review of BigJudge's T-47 Snowspeeder model. If you built it yourself, you have something to share that I left out, or have a question about something I didn't cover, please leave them below in the comments. Remember to leave the video a like, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Instagram if you haven't already, and I hope to see you back next time.